I got friends only wanna talk business. I got expensive, cause winning's expensive. I got expensive, cause winning's expensive. I've been reading all the war, and I've been shutting down the stars.
And welcome to Put That Coffee Down, the freight sales show for closers. My name's Kevin Hill. I'm your host for this half hour as we talk about sales and the freight markets and everything in between. But let's talk about F3 for just a second, because it was an amazing week here in Chattanooga last week, all around downtown. We had great concerts, amazing events all over the city, the aquarium, Coolidge Park, the concerts over here by the football stadium downtown. And then during the days, we had excellent content. We had 50 demo companies showing up to talk about their new tech. And we have one of those demo companies here with some exciting tech for the space, for freight brokerages especially. And it's all about trust, but verify your carrier relationship. So we'll have Jordan Graft, CEO of Highway, on in just a moment here. But before we wrap into that, if you didn't go to F3, you missed out. Start planning, put on your calendar right now for next November here in Chattanooga as we do the Festival of Freight, the Future of Freight Festival, as we call it here in downtown Chattanooga. But it was an amazing event. Everything was live streamed, so you can catch the content on tv.freightwaves.com. I did a couple shows with Trucker Tools, Kerry Jablonski. Also talked to Lean Solutions. Amazing story from Tatiana over there and her career path in Colombia. And also Renee Krug from Transflow, CEO over there, talking about automation, and really automation as a way to put your employees, out of the tedious tasks into revenue producing activities. And I think we can all agree that everyone really wants that to be revenue facing and drive value into the business instead of inputting invoices. So all of that is great context right there for everything. So let's talk about the market a little bit. I have 2 or 3 charts here that we can throw up to show where we are here in 2022 compared to 2021, 2020, and also 2019. So if you can throw up the first chart with outbound tender volume index levels that we're seeing right now, that'd be great. Tanner Bailey, thank you very much. So what we see here, let me hide something on my screen here. What we see here is that the green and blue, 2020, 2021, green. You saw great levels, everyone on their couches buying things. The white line is this year. These are all seasonal trends. The orange line is 2019. We're getting very close to those 2019 levels, which, wasn't necessarily recessionary levels, but it's far below what we've seen the last 2 years. Load volumes are down. Capacity is up, as we'll talk to Jordan about. And what we have is, a soft market where things are falling a little bit. So if we go to the next slide here, we'll see the van contract rates. Van contract is sliding. It takes a little bit longer process than on the spot market. So in the white, you have contract rates, dry van contract rates. In the green, you have the NTIL, which is FreightWaves Natural Truckload Index, line haul rates only. And what you see is a falling rate. Certainly what we saw earlier in the year. It's still not really bottomed out. It's $1.75 per mile right now. If you looked at it last year, you're around $3 a mile. So it's slipped about 42%. Just line haul only. If you add fuel in there, it hasn't slipped quite as much, but it's still down. Unfortunately, fuel prices are up, which kind of destroys that. And my final chart here that we can go over. I think I have a final chart. If not, then there it is right there. There's contract load acceptance volume, right? So we have OTVI, which are all loads. This is concentrated on contract loads and kind of directional movements. You see it's starting to seep into the load volumes are starting to seep into the contract market where there's less contracted loads, right? Part of the spot market fall earlier this year was resetting of higher contract rates that were above spot. So the contract market soaked up a lot of that spot market freight, which created overcapacity in the spot market and caused the crash. You're starting to see load volumes pulled down. It's kind of going back to that peak season. This is going to be a very muted peak season. It might have already occurred. I wouldn't see, in 2019, it was pretty muted as well. We saw a couple, 3 weeks of double-digit rejection rates, which were tight capacity, the tightest capacity that the market had seen in 2019. We might see that same scenario play out here in 2022, where you have a couple weeks where you have a tight market, but that is about it. So we'll see. We'll keep our eye on the market as always here at FreightWaves and see that. Let's talk about Triumph Pay. They're our sponsor here at Put That Coffee Down. And Triumph Pay is the payments network for trucking. Triumph Pay creates cost and time efficiencies and reduces risks so carriers can get paid quickly and safely. Our network provides brokers, shippers, and factors transparency across the entire payments process. Log on to triumphpay.com to learn more. So you can head over to Triumph Pay and talk about payments and that good stuff. But without further ado, let's bring on our guest today on Put That Coffee Down. It's Jordan Graft, CEO of Highway. Jordan, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Kevin, how are you, sir? Good to see you.
It's good to see you too. It's good to see you last week in Chattanooga, F3, and see your demo.
Man, I love that you guys did it in Chattanooga on the home field turf there. You made all of us come to you this time. That was my first observation. My second observation was the only person I saw at the conference without a name badge was Craig Fuller. And I went up to him. I was like, Craig, come on, wear a name badge. I know we all know who you are. Your dad's wearing a name badge. Max Fuller had his name badge on. So I was like, Craig, we're doing your home field turf. You're not wearing a name badge. Come on, man.
And some people don't have to wear name badges, right? Some people are recognizable. So that is good. Now, I was told to ask you by Michael Vincent, did you pay him his $500?
I want him to have something to talk about. He's always looking for content for What the Truck. So no, I have not paid him. I do owe him money. I've said enough in the public realm enough. He can document that I 100% owe him a $500 for giving him the opening line at the 2018 Transparency 18, which killed. And so, in my mind, I'm like, I gave you a line that killed. He came out, he said, "Hello, Sharks," and I was supposed to pay him $500 for doing that. So, yeah, I guess I need to get that done.
He's all about the royalty money. Michael Vincent.
Right.
All about the royalty money.
That's right. Yes, sir.
So,
yes, sir.
No problem. So let's talk about Highway, kind of how you got started. Going through this, about 30 minutes ago, I remembered Reagan. Jordan, you look like a Reagan fan. Reagan's famous line, "Trust but verify." And as freight brokers and building those carrier relationships, onboarding new carriers, it's all about a trust, long-term carrier relationship, but you got to verify. And that's kind of the essence of Highway in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, I know most people are probably aware of it, but Highway got its start by, when I bought CarrierList from you. I mean, you're a big part of this. You and I have known each other now for a long time. I think I was one of the first people that hired you at CarrierList to do a survey at the time when I was running Triumph Pay. You did a quick pay survey for us on Freight Brokers quick pay programs. But when we were going through the CarrierList transaction, you were at FreightWaves, you needed something to do, and I just left Triumph Pay and was looking for the next thing, and had this vision for Highway about creating a single sign-on for trucking. And when you and I talked about CarrierList, what was fascinating to me, you do these survey notes. You were doing the survey team, and we still do that in a lot of ways. And a lot of the value that the customers were seeing out of the survey notes was that kind of next level down. And it was like, what equipment do you have and where do you like to run? And it was, if we could answer those two questions for a carrier sales team, it can get them calling the right carriers faster and spending less. If you get into the right carrier faster, it just creates more throughput, higher return on invested capital right there with those carrier salespeople calling the right team members. Save them 5 phone calls to get the load covered. Is, you do that, multiply that times 1,000, it really adds up. And so as you and I were talking about equipment and how important that was, because if you got a reefer load to cover and you're calling drive-in carriers because you don't know what equipment they have, you're wasting time and you're wasting at bats. And it sent me down a path that was like, how do we do this at scale instead of having people call carriers? How can we go, one, get this data, and two, transform it into what freight brokers care about? You guys are unique, and the broker freight community is unique in that they seek this data more than about anyone else. You think about equipment finance providers, insurance providers, factoring companies, banks, anybody that's trying to sell into the carrier channel. No one has that. No one has this massive need to understand the equipment portfolio like a broker does. Even a shipper doesn't have it at the level that a broker does, because brokers are dealing in such high friction, high transactional environment. And so we went down that path, and we're able to successfully, find a way to obtain that data, and then secondarily transform it into the trailer types of what types of trailers they have. And so Highway now has this visibility into the equipment portfolio of 280,000 carriers in the U.S. We have 90% of all Class 8 power units and 53-foot trailers classified and categorized in our database. And so we can tell you, here are all the flatbed carriers in the U.S., and here are all the reefer carriers in the U.S. And we can do it with a high level of accuracy so that you can, refine your carrier sales initiatives and get to the right answer faster. I mean, making a shout out to your Glenn Ross references here with Put That Coffee Down. It's the leads. Like, it's the leads that they, all the sales guys want. It's those special leads, right? And that's it. It's like, if we can create the high value leads for you by enriching that data, qualifying those carriers and qualifying them into what equipment they have and where they like to run, we can get you to the right answer faster.
Yeah, and I should have let off full disclosure. I do have an interest in Highway, and that's the reason, because you bought it. And one of the reasons why I was making those phone calls is because I didn't know what else to do, right? And just getting that basic information was good, but you did take it to the next level of being able to, quantifiably measure what we were asking, right? You were able to verify that through, trailer data, truck data, all kinds of different sources that I couldn't do. And that brings an extra amount of security to the platform and what else you're doing and building on top of that, right? Because that's a small piece of what you're building for Highway right now.
Yeah. And then the other component of it was, Kevin, when we first started talking, the geospatial relevance of like where a carrier operates. A lot of people like to say when they look at Highway and they look at the sourcing component, they're like, it's just inspection data. Well, it's inspection data plus a lot of other data, but where I think we have a unique advantage in our experience between our development team. It's a development team that I built and handpicked from people I'd worked with when I ran a development firm here in Dallas. We had 30 people, and we built custom applications for people. I kind of handpicked the people that had the experience that was relevant for transportation, which a lot of that is geospatial. Is where is this happening and how often is it happening? And so that concept of it, someone says, oh, well, I've already got this in my system, I'm already doing it. What Highway really does well is we don't need to know the empirical answer ahead of time. We don't need to know this carrier specifically runs this lane, because you think about your preferences. Companies like, let's take a different example here for a second. So when you talk about recommendation engines, things like Netflix, things like Yelp, these providers that take the data about your habits and patterns and then create curated content for you. You're not telling Netflix, I like to watch, Glenn Ross, right? They're looking at your behavior patterns and things they know and see about you doing to make a recommendation for you. And Highway wants to do that same thing. Is we want to take all the data patterns that we see as it lays, so as the data exists, and not ask anybody to do, take any extra effort, right? These providers, these recommendation engines, when they're really good, they don't ask you to take extra effort. They use the data that is naturally available to make these recommendations. And that's what Highway does with the geospatial analysis of a carrier to say, okay, Now I'm looking for this lane. We don't need to know that the carrier's ever actually ran that lane. We're able to predictably analyze and say, okay, would they run this lane? Would this be potentially a good carrier for you? And then overlay that equipment onto it to say, okay, do they have the equipment that you need for that lane? And so, again, for that sourcing side, it's incredibly valuable. Now, as we talk about the fraud component of that, so as we think about, fraud, it's can this carrier really do that? And that's where Highway solves creates a ton of value for the broker freight community and the brokers using it. Is we say, okay, you're looking at a lane, you're looking at a reefer load in this lane, and you got a carrier calling in off the load board and saying that they're going to run that lane. What is the likelihood that they actually are capable of doing that, and that you're not potentially walking into a high risk scenario and going to step on a landmine with a double brokering situation, or an event of someone pretending to be a carrier? Like that's kind of the next step where I think honestly we create the most value is really analyzing the identity of that carrier in saying, okay, three things: who are you? Are you really the carrier? And what equipment do you actually have? Can you actually facilitate? Do you have the capabilities to facilitate the transaction I'm asking you to do?
Yeah, you see these bulletins all the time, and if you've brokered freight for a year or 2 years, you've been in these situations, hostage loads, right? I've had to call the cops 2 times, right? You have people calling in with the MC number, and the domain that they're using on their email address is 1 letter off than the actual, and then they're looking for a fuel payment, or they're going to move the load for you. But they're going to stiff one of the parties afterwards, right? And we have all run into these situations, and identity and fraud is a huge issue, and being able to verify who you're talking to, the counterparty, the carrier is a huge thing that the industry really needs, I think.
Yeah, and my background is in financial services and software development. Our family's been involved in banking since my dad bought a failed bank from the FDIC in the 70s out in Western Oklahoma. And so I've got a front row seat watching the transformation of even a small regional community bank and how they, and how they think about identity. And then, I started my career working for JP Morgan, and I remember sitting on our first transaction, working on our first transaction as an analyst. I was a low-level grunt. And so I did all the grunt work. They came to me and they said, hey, we're going to have to KYC this customer. I was like, I'm from West Oklahoma. I don't know what KYC means. And like, know your client. I was like, it's Michael Kors. It's this massive brand. It's everywhere and has all these things. That actually wasn't the first one. Let me tell you about the first one. The first one, they're like, we're going to do KYC. I was like, okay. Well, let's work on it as the head of an IPO. And I was like, why do we need to do this? It was a well-known retailer, stores everywhere. We knew it. And through that process, what was absolutely fascinating, I got a front row seat, is they were making misrepresentations about the credentials of their CEO. And it ultimately led to them shelving the IPO, the CEO being terminated, and delaying and creating, a delay in the execution. But what it saved was billions of dollars, because now the banks would have had reputational risk. The investors that were investing in that stock, if you have a leader at an organization who's willing to lie about their credentials, what else are they going to be willing to lie about? And so it was just a safety mechanism that was put at the front of a very large organization in a very large transaction that, in my mind, you think, wow, we should be able to trust this entity because we can see it. And so as we overlay that into transportation and trucking, broker freight has grown so much. I mean, you think about backhaulers the backhaulers is 40 years old, which is fascinating, because if you talk to Jeff Tucker, he'll tell you that Tucker Logistics Tucker Worldwide has the oldest operating property broker authority in the U.S. I think Bruce Johnson might argue with him a little bit, but this industry's not been around that long. It's like 40 years. And even in the last 20 years, you've just seen explosive growth in this space. And freight brokers, because of the nature of their carrier networks, haven't had the innovation that they need to bring this kind of level of identity in KYC, which we jokingly call, we use a pun, know your carrier instead of know your customer. But they haven't had the toolkit to do it. And so what you see is the byproduct. You see double brokering, you see carrier identity theft, you see hostage loads, you see bad actors able to find their way into the network. And it overlays so perfectly onto what we saw on the financial services side 20 years ago. in that the bad actors were getting in the network, they were getting inside the financial service providers, and then they were trying to use all these tools to get them out once they were in. And the solution that everybody came up with is like, okay, we got to put something on the front end, and we got to put this KYC process on the front end so we don't let the bad actors in the house, because once they're in, they can wreak havoc, and you waste a ton of time with internal resources and human capital trying to get them out. And so that's what Highway does for a broker is we say, listen, we're going to be your frontline defense. We're going to be the tip of the spear that's out there preventing these bad actors from getting into your network in the first place, so that you, once they're in, you have more comfort and comfortability about what's been verified about their identity and their capabilities, so that you can transact more efficiently.
That is that's perfect. We do have a chart here. Let's talk about some market data. I want to get to this, but before we leave here, because I think this is one of the wonderful tools about collecting all this data is that, as freight brokers, you sit around and you're like, how big's the flatbed market, dry van market, what? And if you have data on the entire market, the entire carrier market out there, you can start pinpointing some of this. So this is, does any of this surprise you?
So it surprised me the first time I saw it. There's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears personally for me in this slide to create this. Because we do this at the per piece of equipment level, like going down and saying, is this trailer a dry van, reefer, flatbed? It sent me down, a path of learning about trailer manufacturers and looking at the industrial organization of that industry and learning so much about them. And I actually got to meet Great Dane at F3, and it was so fascinating, like walking him through and like showing him what I'd done. And he's like, you know what? You're right. Like that is correct. That is, that unit is a reefer. How did you figure that out? And I was like, well, I'll tell you another day. And so what that allows us to see is like holistically across the industry and say, okay, 45% of all trailers are dry van, 21% are reefer or temperature controlled, 14% are flatbed. And just even that, like, as you think about strategic road mapping for a broker, as you think about the other types of modes, or mode's not the right word, but other types of truckload categories you want to get into, whether it's flatbed, like having an understanding what that flatbed market looks like, what the carrier space looks like, where those carriers are, the consolidation of those carriers. See, flatbed's much more consolidated than dry van, and so flatbed and reefer, as most people don't know, but like they're pretty consolidated. There's really only 20 to 30,000, really 20,000 highly active reefer carriers in the U.S. And they have, their concentration of trailer counts is much more consolidated at the top levels versus dry van. You get just this massive long tail. And so as you think about strategically as a broker, where do I want to go? Where do I, what other verticals do I want to get into? Do I want to get into flatbed? Do I want to get into tanker? Well, it's a little bit of the chicken and egg. You got to have the loads, but you also got to have the carriers. And so we can give them the confidence to say is like, okay, I'm thinking about going and pursuing, hazmat tanker loads. And I've got some, shippers that we've had maybe some relationships with or some intros with. Okay, let me go see what my capabilities would be on the sourcing side, on the carrier side, to think about what are the hazmat tankers out there. Do I have any, relationships with any of those or any in my network by chance? Or if they're not in my network, do I have an inroads, at least an ability to like identify and have a place to call in to get them into my network? So it's a really powerful tool. It's really powerful data. We're just now beginning to really help brokers understand how they can use it, both at the strategic level and at the tactical day-to-day level. And it's really cool to see. We go to conferences now, like we went to our first set of conferences in McLeod and TIA and FreightWaves in this fall. And it was really fun seeing customers come up. And I know a ton of people in the broker freight community now. I love this community. And there was someone come up to me that I never met before. And they were a user of Highway, and they use it for sourcing. And he came up and he said, man, like, it's been transformational. It's helped our carrier sales team. We got a lot of young carrier sales reps. They don't have a ton of relationships. It's really helping them get in front of the right people. It's the first place we go to now. And it was just so cool to see, Kevin, you and I, this vision that I'd had, you were a big part of, like in person, someone coming up and saying, this is transformational for our business.
Yeah, and it takes it to the next level, because my whole vision the entire time was having a transparent look at the entire market And if you have that look at the entire market, then you can start segmenting it out. You can start saying, I need flatbeds from X to Y, from point A to point B. You can start really strategizing, because a lot of large numbers get thrown around in trucking. There's 500,000 active carriers or whatever, right? Well, okay, how many actually have insurance? How many are like agricultural? How many are tankers, van, reefer, flatbed, bread and butter? And now you can start answering those questions, which is huge. We just have a few seconds left. So I want to thank you, Jordan, for coming on the show today. And you can go to gohighway.com to learn more and set up a demo.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin.
You bet. And that wraps it for this edition of Put That Coffee Down. We'll be back tomorrow, or not tomorrow, but next week at 12 p.m. Eastern Time.
I got friends only wanna